is waiting in the wings.
Jamie, how are you?
I know to you I may look old. Hope this statement ain't too bold, but here comes the
I don't suspect that Judge Napolitano's up to speed on the ACLU Taylor Swift controversy, but
I knew about the Taylor. By the way, good morning. I knew about the Taylor Swift controversy, but I didn't know the ACLU was involved.
Well, seemingly there's always that's the problem. There's always seemingly a Taylor Swift controversy, as well accomplished as she is. Well, they're getting on her because her legal team wrote to a blogger that they ought to retract this claim that she's somehow tied to the Nazi party and white supremacists. So I could hardly blame her. But why the ACLU is after her? They're not doing anything but exercising their right to get back in the face of the media, which is everybody. You could write a letter to the New York Times right now and ask them to retract something.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, this situation regarding the gun laws, as obviously the usual suspects are coming out regarding gun laws, but now it turns out that there were laws in place, but, Judge, they just simply were not followed.
You know, it's very strange. If you in Texas go to buy a rifle at Walmart will run a very simple background check. That's because of federal law. Texas law requires no background check, and it requires no license to purchase and no license to carry. But if you buy the gun at a gun show or from your uncle or from your nephew, no background check is required, and therefore you can lawfully own and lawfully carry the rifle. That is about, as one way to look at it, pro right to keep and bear arms. Another way to look at it is loose, a standard as exists anywhere in the United States. Apparently he did buy this from a bona fide dealer in Colorado who ran the background check. Now, these background checks just take a few minutes. They're done by a computer, and the computer accesses an FBI database. But the database is only as good as what's put in there. So if the Air Force failed to put in there that he was convicted of a crime of domestic violence, which under federal law is enough to block the sale, then the sale is not going to be blocked because it wasn't in there. On the other hand, he could easily have, if he wanted to kill somebody, get a weapon perfectly lawfully without buying it from a shop that did the background check. So what is the answer? Is the answer more secure background checks? I don't think so, because people will find a way to kill if they want to kill. The only answer is more guns. These things all have the same ending. They stop when the killer is killed, and the killer should be killed sooner rather than later. And that means by civilians rather than police. You can't have a cop in every church. It's just not practical or feasible. But you can have well-trained civilians everywhere, so that when the killer plans this thing, it's not like shooting fish in a barrel, because the fish are going to shoot back.
Right, and in this case, even when it comes to a national database, let's go back to the post shooting where at the school, and where the Democrats came up with a gun control plan, and originally people don't really realize this. The NRA seemed to be okay with the national database issue. And it was kind of odd to people. They were a little surprised by that. But then what happened is the Democrats overplayed their hand. And then they wanted more. And they wanted limitations on certain kinds of ammo. Then they wanted this. Then they wanted that. And suddenly there's President Obama standing in front of the Capitol or wherever it was with the parents, empty-handed. And so the NRA hasn't been completely unreasonable in certain reasonable additions to gun laws. Nobody
takes gun laws, except the Supreme Court, seriously enough as being an extension of your natural right to self-defense. When Barack Obama was president of the United States, the president has too much power in this country. He can direct the DEA, the Drug Enforcement, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They used to all be together. Now they're separate. So he can direct the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to limit the amount of ammunition that the people they license, who are dealers, you have to have a federal license and a state license to sell ammunition, can sell. So he can dial back on his own your right to purchase ammunition. Obviously, without ammunition, the weapon is virtually useless. Donald Trump becomes president, and he can remove that restriction. No president should have the authority to interfere with the right to keep and bear arms. And the answer is not these background checks, because monsters will find ways around them. Right now, as we speak, I'm watching the Secretary of the Air Force being interviewed by a couple of my colleagues downstairs in one of the studios here.
Yes.
At Fox News, and she's saying, he was court-martialed, and we don't know how this slipped through the cracks. Government can't protect us. Government can't be relied on to keep us safe. The NSA surveils every cell phone in the country. This killer in New York that ran his truck on a bike path last week, you know what he had on his iPhone? 4,000 ISIS photographs of beheadings, and the NSA didn't catch that. Well, the NSA didn't catch that. The Air Force didn't catch this creep that killed in Texas, which means we have to keep ourselves safe by carrying our own weapons and being proficient at them and having the courage to use them.
Yes, and here's one more thing. I'm sure this might be in the offing depending on how much they know about him and the possibility that he was mentally ill. I always caution people about suddenly reflexively saying, well, the mentally ill ought to be barred from owning guns, because then suddenly who's going to define what a mentally ill person is? Does that mean somebody who is depressed, which would probably be half this country on Xanax? Where do you stop when it comes to regulating somebody's illness, or how do you describe it? Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. Well, should the mentally ill be deprived of Twitter and Facebook as well?
Right.
If they're going to take away the Second Amendment rights on some bureaucratic standard, are they going to take away the First? Do they have a right to privacy under the Fourth Amendment? Do they have a right not to testify against themselves under the Fifth? Or can they be tortured? I mean, where will this stop? What bureaucrat wouldn't opt in favor of getting rid of the Constitution? The Constitution is an obstacle to the government, and it was intended to be.
Yeah, boy, you're so right. That's why they call you the Thresher. They don't call you that. I did, and you got to be familiar.
Jamie, I love you, and I got to tell you another story. Too much to tell on air about Raymond Leo Cardinal Burke, and what a wonderful, blessed human being he is and continues to be.
I was just reading about him, and boy, did he have some guts regarding the Pope, and good for him.
Yeah. He had a chance encounter with a friend of mine in Fatima, and it brought goosebumps to my arms. What she recounted, she said, and what she recounted, he said. Too much to put on air, but he remains a living saint.
Well, I'll try to talk to you offline about that, because I would love to hear more about it. So I appreciate you, my friend.
All the best, my
man. All right, you too. At Judge Knapp, JudgeKnapp.com. Yeah, you hear about the infallibility of the Pope, but the Pope is only infallible when he is in lockstep with the bishops. Just saying. That's a lot to swallow in that short period of time, but let me get out of here before I get struck by lightning.